our farm, we own land, we rent land, and we also do custom farm work. We own about 1,200 acres. Everything else that we farm is either custom or rental. And the amount of total acres that we go over can vary every year based on the amount of custom work that we take on or don't take on. In this video, I'm going to talk about prices, how you can buy land, my experience with tillable.com, and just what incomes are to be made with different ownerships or rental agreements. And from first-hand experience, before we even get into the video, I will say that the only money that we really make is on the ground that we actually own that's been paid for many years, started by my great-grandfather, and then some land was purchased by even my father when he was younger. I would love to be able to buy some land for myself, but before we talk about that, let's talk about what goes into buying land. Obviously, if you're going to plant corn on it, you have to have your seed, your chemicals, your fertilizer. You need to get paid to be combined, planting charges, tillage charges, other charges such as fungicide or application. That's about $380 an acre there that tallies up to. And there isn't much you can do to offset those unless you steal the chemicals or steal the seed, which would be illegal. But then you need to figure in, if you own the ground or you're buying it, property tax, which in our area is about $31 an acre. Or, of course, if you rented the ground, which most ground around here is going between $220 and $300 right now. Some as high as $400, just depends on the piece and the location. But anyway, if you tally all this up with property tax, and say you owned it, you'd have $411 total inputs there, and that's probably figuring quite conservatively. Now, I went over to a land payment calculator, and I figured just a 160-acre farm, which would be about 150 tillable likely. If you gave $7,500 an acre for it, which that would be kind of land in our area because it's not all farmable, it's measured in the centers of the roads. That's probably an average selling price. Anyway, it gives you a total dollars of $1,125,000 to buy that chunk of land. And 25% down, which is what a lot of banks are asking for right now. So you'd have to have $281,250 down the payment, which, unless you go to the young farmer startup or something of that nature, good luck having that. You know, you'd have to have supplemental income to have it. So that leaves you with needing to pay a bank $844,000 for the mortgage on that 160, and that would be 30 years would be a payment of $49,138, and that equates out to $327 an acre. And you can go on to Farm Credit's website, and you can see, you know, they give you a breakdown, a little calculator here. And you might get interest rates a little cheaper than that right now if you're going through like a Farm Credit instead of a Farmer Mac. Now, let's discuss if we actually can pay for this ground or not. So you take $5 corn, 180 bushel per acre, and yes, 180 bushel per acre. I think our 5-year county average, they have 5-year, 10-year, last year's, they have all sorts of different averages, but just say like a 5-year would be 180 bushel an acre. And we got to imagine that $5 corn is this year, and before anybody says, well, I can get $6.50 for my corn, well, yeah, you can too if you hit the high day, but we got figured trend lines here because a bank doesn't go on as of the day. They're going to figure on trend line averages. And you got to forget that a year or so ago, 2020, we were selling corn for $2.82, and you know, marketing average is like $3.95 there. So you figure if you get this $327 an acre payment, and you got $411 an acre into the ground, that's $738. And again, that's figuring conservatively. So you'd have a gross of $900, and if corn trickled back off, you have $711, and you know you're at a loss at that point. Or if you have 180 bushel corn or 182 bushel corn, 80% crop insurance, that means you're only going to pay, or only going to get 145 bushel guarantee. And bear in mind, I didn't put insurance on here for an additional charge either. But it was $550, so you're at $800. So basically, you can see, figuring all of these, that you got to get some pretty decent prices, not a market just right, and the markets aren't always there. To be able to buy that chunk of land. So essentially it takes supplemental income to be able to buy a piece of ground. Now if you owned it, you can do okay. But rent's going to be your other option, which is very similar to the payment, although you would minus the property tax, because the rent or the owner usually pays that. It just depends on how your rental agreement's structured. But so if you're paying this rent, and you got similar amount of money into it, also not very much income to be made, depending upon the year, and there's a lot of guys that are willing to work, this number here. If you're making $50 an acre and you're buying a combine, or you're buying a full line of equipment, 1,000 acres at $50 an acre, you guys can do the math there. That's not much profit margin. And especially when that profit margin directly has to go back into things that are controlled by corporations, which are beyond our control as farmers, unless you just don't buy them. So it's a tough game, and anybody in the farming industry would know that these numbers are halfway legitimate. Like I said, I didn't put taxes or insurances in there, and taxes would be something else. Now, back to this down payment here. If you need the down payment, you can go to the FSA office. They can give you, I think, like a 5 or 10 year loan for the down payment. But then you're basically paying 2 loans that upfront year. And as you can see, that's just another payment there. If you drop it down, 10 years, another payment. So that, your land payment is pretty expensive to buy a 160 acre farm. So realistically, we would need to be at $6 and $7 corn almost continuously to really make current land prices even work. Now, how these guys are buying land, a lot of them have had supplemental income, or they are land investors that are able to go out and just buy it with cash. Now, if you own a .com business or something like that, or you're a lawyer, doctor, whatever, you're making $500,000 a year, you got a couple $100,000 to put away, as you just don't need it. It doesn't take 4 or 5 years of savings. They got $1 million pretty quick and easy. It's pretty easy to see that people with money are going to own all the land in the United States here relatively soon. So what's a good side income? Well, for us, there's wind turbines coming in. Some of them are paying about $16,000 a year. Just do simple math, times 10, that's $160,000 a year. And times 5 years, $800,000, times 10, $1,600,000, and times 20 years, which is usually life of the contract, $3,200,000. So as you can quickly see, and again, this would be taxable income likely, depending on your deductions. As you can quickly see, it adds up for easy supplemental income. Now, before everybody gets their panties in a bunch over the wind turbine debate, go back a few videos where I talked about a neighboring farm. I showed the land, and you can see just how remote it is and just how desolate it is. And you can see that these turbines, I understand the setback laws, how it affects a neighbor, but when there's literally 300 and some acres out there, there's not a single house, property, neighbor, or anything, then it's not bothering anybody. And also, I do realize that turbines are not the only form of supplemental income. There are other things, such as a couple of the larger YouTube channels that make all their income from YouTube. And for that fact, there's a million other ways to make supplemental income in this country. You just have to find that right niche and what things you're good at or enjoy doing that happen to make money. And as I mentioned when I started the video, we own ground, about 1,200 acres of ground. And then we rent and custom farm all the other acres that we go over. The rental ground, we have some with a very conservative rental agreement and a very good landlord that we get along with, great, good friend. And we have others that are a little more challenging, and that stems off into the custom work as well. Now, if you are interested in renting ground, one place that you can find ground for rent would be tillable.com. However, I think it gets a little political on there, and I have been on this site on several tracts of ground with kind of the last tract, and I know there's some locals that watch this channel that would also know which tract that is, where I felt like the process became, for lack of better words, asinine. 51% of the ground across the United States is rented. Tillable has recognized this and decided to capitalize off of it. Tillable has a series of YouTube videos explaining this better than I can, but if you pay attention to the videos, they'll use terms such as underpriced or under-rented. So here's how Tillable works. They data mine the internet in different databases to obtain data, which I hate data mining, but they obtain data and they basically find out who's paying what for rent in roundabout ways, and that's because of all taxes are public record information, at least for farmers. Anyway, they take that information and they'll go to, say, some old widow that's getting $160 an acre, and they'll sweet talk her out of the farm for $325 an acre. And again, I'm just using hypothetical numbers here. And then they'll go out and they'll data mine the farmers in the area and create a bidding war looking for the highest cash rent they can get. Now, they claim they don't always take the highest cash rent value, and you're looking at the lady there named Jessie, as well as this next guy named Mason, and those two, if you're chosen in the high-end cash rent, which they claim it's not just the high-end, but it is, they'll talk to you and have an interview, and what they're doing in their little brief discussion is they're looking for keyword verbiage to basically say how quick can you get this process done, and how well do we like you. Now, in my experience with it, I basically figured out their tactic as the process was occurring. So I made sure to give them the keyword information that they wanted to kind of throw the conversation in my favor. End of the day, we did not get the tract to ground. They claim it went to somebody else that they thought was a better fit. Now, how do you, quote, choose the best farmer for fit when you don't know them, you don't live anywhere near them, and you had literally a 10-minute phone conversation? I think it's all a rope and pony show, and they're only looking for the highest cash rent value. So to be a little bit sarcastic here, but this is pretty much the truth, here's how Tillable works. They data mine you, they find you. Oh, hey, Mrs. Johnson, we'd like to rent your farm for penny, you're only getting $100 an acre. We'll give you $225 an acre. Doesn't that sound pretty good? Oh, I suppose. And by the way, it's a 1-year commitment, that's all. And we'll get all the information from the farmer, and we'll make sure he's doing all these grid samples and crap. Blah, blah, blah. Just fluff it up real good. They get her to commit. She signs for a year. They go out and they data mine farmers. They get a bidding war going. They're making $350 an acre. So they're cashing a $100 check, and they're giving her, the remaining difference. And she feels better because she got a little more money in all this new information packet, like all this grid sampling and crap that nobody ever even looks at. And the farmer probably faked all comes into play. And Tillable hopes that they can continue keeping the farmer bamboozled so that they'll continue to extend rental contracts. Essentially, they are nothing more than an unnecessary middleman, and in my strong opinion, there is no need for Tillable.com. I think some other people have figured that out. That's why they're getting the real estate and stuff. There's no need for them, and any good landowner can form a direct relationship with a renter very easily. And if they're not happy with it, put it in the paper. They'll be happy to get more than a bidding war going just that way, because land is hard to get, and most farmers are very quick to farm for nothing. As far as my experience with Tillable, I didn't feel it was very professional. I thought it was pretty quick to the draw, and I really just don't think that the platform gives fair assessments of people's operations. I think it's about money. Again, I think it's a middleman that's looking out for their own interests. And what that owner of that company saw was 51% of the land in the United States, and he knows that it'll become even more as a rental basis, and he's hoping to capitalize and corner that market. Other things going on in the ag sector to make money on would be carbon credits is the big phase going on right now, where they're sequestering carbon into the land, and honestly the farmers have been doing it right, using cover crops and no-tills in areas that they can anyway, get rewarded the least. The guys that are doing moldboard plowing are probably get rewarded heavier, meaning a heavier payment than the guy that was already doing the no-till. Indigo Ag is a big advocate of that, and they are yet again another middleman. For anybody that doesn't know how carbon credits work, here's how they work. Factories pollute, yet they pay to pollute. Because they can pay to pollute actually means they probably almost pollute worse than if they were required just to clean it up. So they said, oh, where pollution's going out, hey, let's have a farmer sequester our carbon that's falling to the earth. So basically they're polluting and they're paying off people to take care of their problem. And that's how they trade carbon credits. Now, this is how carbon credits work. So here's the factory, which is a guy pissing in a stream. Down the stream is everybody else drinking the water. So this guy here comes back here, these guys, and now gives them $10 a piece and says, well, it's cool because I gave you the $10 a piece. Now, Indigo Ag's part in this whole carbon program is yet again a middleman. There is no direct correlation between a company polluting and a farmer who's solving the pollution, so they create a middleman. So the middleman takes these money from the company and then redistributes it to the farmer as here's your payment. And I'm sure it's pennies on the dollar, so we'll take in 100 and give the farmer 10 to actually take care of the real problem. That's why Biden was trying to set up a carbon bank, was to form a correlation bridge between the polluter and the farmer. I honestly don't know why these corporations couldn't go out and find certain farmers or certain farm groups. They dump it over on a middleman, like Bayer is one of them that's big in this right now. And it's probably funny. I don't know this for certain, but you can just about imagine that like Bayer would be one of the problem polluters, and then they turn around and sell a carbon program to clean up their own mess. Anyway. Carbon sequestering really is nothing new. I mean, we're already doing it in a no-till operation, but we're not being paid for it. And if you read the contract through Indigo Ag, it's a little scary because if you even go out and do some spot tillage, to clean up an iffy spot, you might get $4 an acre your first year. So 1,000 acres, you can do the math there. It isn't much, and you got to go out and disc a little a wet spot in or something to clean it up. And then you get nailed on a fine because, and it says you can be paid back plus more. They can actually charge your whole farm a certain amount. So it's nothing that I want to be involved with unless there was a pretty large amount of payments per acre. And they actually had a meeting with Joe Biden on this, and he was wondering why a lot of farmers are not signing up. And they said, well, we'd like to have $100 an acre, and he says that'll be $10 billion. So the actual value to get farmers enticed to do what really needs to be done, which would be like $100 an acre, nobody ever seems to have the money for it, and companies really don't want to pay that much, and middlemen want their greedy hands involved with it. Middlemen is job creation, and these are programs that don't exist for any reason. Besides that, like I said, carbon sequestering, you're not going to get everybody to sign up. And the people who are no-tilling now are already taking care of it. And the people that are already moldboarding right now, it's going to be very highly likely to encourage them at $10 an acre to change their tactics. Maybe at $100 to $200 an acre, they might start looking at it differently. But there's areas where tillage works and other areas where no-till works better. And it's just like I said at the beginning of this video, when I started talking about in our particular area, in our particular land, you go 2 counties over, it's a different story. So for this video to be fitting for all operations across the United States would be nearly impossible. Only report on our farm in general in our specific little area. And there's lots more topic and debate that go into all of these subjects on here. As I mentioned earlier, for buying land would probably be the best option, but to be able to buy land, it pretty much requires a supplemental income. And if you're having a supplemental income, why do you want to invest it in land? However, if you are investing it in land, you're supplementing that land at a certain point becomes self-sufficient, self-sustaining, which allows it to grow. Now, for somebody like myself that grew up at a time era where you could buy land and pay for it just by farming it, and actually still made a few dollars after the land payment. Seeing what we're seeing now as a changed way of life, I'm not thrilled with it, but it's the way things are. As for tillable.com, if there's a bid opportunity, of course I'll go after it with probably little to no hope at this point. But as far as ever becoming involved with it for a rental, if you're wanting to rent your farm out, I would advise anybody that there's a much, much better way without a middleman taking a chunk of your change to go about that procedure. And cash rent's a difficult one because it's a case-by-case basis. It's case-by-case farmer who's on there. There's so many variables that go into that, I could make a 3-hour video. But I don't think there is a need for a middleman. Farmers National was another company that was kind of the originator on that, was farm management. So you get an old lady or something dies, leaves it to kids, and they don't give a crap about it. It's just a chunk that mom and dad left me for over the years. And I live in California now. The farm is in Iowa. It needs me to take care of it, and a middleman company to do that is an unnecessary piece of that puzzle. But those are people that have no heritage to their farm or operation. That's also where they usually only care about one thing, that's money. Now, for all my farmers that watch this channel, I'm pretty sure if you didn't learn anything, But for a few that do not farm, maybe you learned something, and appreciate all of you watching the videos. And there'll be more like this and other behind the scenes things that are pieces of the puzzle of our operation and things that we've dealt with over the years and how we've gotten to where we are now. As far as our operation doing the custom work, I am slowly trickling that off a little bit. I would look for ground to rent. I would ultimately like to buy the ground, but at the end of the day, it's a business. You got to make money, and if you're just burning up iron to make $10 an acre, I don't know that it's really the way this iron's going up in price. I don't know that it really works out to do that. So, while cash flow and other things are considerable factors, also making a living at the end of the day has to be in consideration. Other factors such as labor and time, meaning like how long it takes to get over the land, are other factors to consider. And trend line history, which I mentioned earlier, which is what banks will use when giving you a loan on land. And Iowa State gives a futures markets throughout history. Ironically, you can look through these and see that in 1983 we're getting just about as much for our soybeans as we did in 2020, which a tractor in 83 was not near as much. Which is one of the main reasons we lease our new tractors, and that's a topic of different discussion. I've already discussed it on the main channel. There are just so many factors that go into agriculture with the same bottom line no matter who you talk to. As for me, I'd rather be buying ground than to continue renting or custom farming any of the acres, as long term it seems like the best option. However, getting a bank on board with that's not quite as easy. So my options would be to save up somehow, or start a secondary business somehow, or to look at a contract sale on ground. And that's a difficult thing to do, and that's if you find the right piece at the right price. So what I'm getting at, buying ground is not easy. There's just a lot of factors to consider and go into all of this video, way more than I put in the short 20 minutes here. And here was a letter from the United Farmers Cooperative, which is our local co-op, explaining how much profit they made for the year and giving their shareholders blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I thought that co-ops were by the farmer and for the farmer as a collective effort to farmers to save money, not to generate profit. Interesting. See you in the next video.